Hello, and thank you all for joining us for this masterclass all about fussy eating. And we're going to be talking about the hidden drivers of mealtime struggles because fussy eating is not as simple as people can think that it is. So your hosts today for the presentation are these lovely people. So I'm Lisa on the left in the white dress. Then we have Sarah, one of our nutritionists. We have Celine, our dietitian, and Summer, another one of our nutritionists. So, as well as being nutritionists or dietitians, we are all qualified SOS feeding therapists. So we are, trained and skilled in actually how to approach fussy eaters in a way that's not going to do more harm than good and be very supportive and gentle. So I'll kick off with this little story just to kind of set the scene about what we do here. So this is somebody who wrote a Google review, and they've written that my son had a very restricted diet of bland foods and texture sensitivity. During his time in the Paediatric Naturopath fussy eating program, he tried each food and they worked with him to improve his ability to give feedback on what he was tasting. So this was an older child who was just rejecting an entire meal because he didn't want some of the foods that were on it. And what we did was we helped him articulate what he likes and doesn't like, helped him understand that he can actually, eat part of the meal. The whole meal isn't ruined if there's something that he doesn't like. She's also written they recognized what he would be deficient in due to his limited diet and suggested supplements in forms that he would tolerate taking, which has helped with some of the other symptoms such as low energy, frequent colds, and lethargy. And that's the beauty of working with a holistic team is that you might have a problem with fussy eating, but the way we approach it, you end up getting benefits across the child's whole life, not just in the aspect of fussy eating. You get improvements to their mental health, their energy, their immune system, their sleep, everything when you work to see what is holding this child back in terms of nutrients. And they've also written the lovely thing, Paediatric Naturopath will be our first choice in the future when needing to address any health or behavioral concerns. So that's just a lovely little Google review. If you want, you can jump onto Google and read more reviews about the team. So before we get started, I'll just say, please ask questions. You can either unmute yourself and just ask a question live. You're more than welcome to do that. Or you can tap into the chat box, which I will try to remember to check every time there's kind of a break in proceedings. I'll have a look at the chat. So I will just send a message in the chat now just to say hello so everybody knows where you can post the questions. There we go. So as I say, it's not a sort of a linear problem being a fussy eater. There's multiple different inputs. There's multiple different things that can go wrong. There's multiple different reasons why a child has an issue with eating. And we have treated hundreds of picky eaters within our practice, bringing them through this program. And I would say they're all different. Every single child that we have seen has been different. There's no type that we see all the time. Everybody is unique and everybody has their own issues. And these are some of the things that we find are important. So food intolerances, toxicities. So we do, which I'll talk about later, but we do heavy metal testing on children, see if they've got toxicities. Some children, it might be anxiety, they might have sensory issues. We've picked up celiac disease in quite a few kids. They can have oral motor issues, so actually difficulty manipulating food in their mouth. They can have nutrient deficiencies and they kind of gut discomfort. So we will be covering some of these things today, but as I say, we've treated hundreds of kids. They're all different. So we, of course, won't be able to cover every single thing that's important when it comes to fussy eating. So these are the three big drivers that we will be talking about today. So we're going to be talking about nutrient deficiencies. So things like zinc, iron, essential fatty acids, protein, and B vitamins. We're going to be talking about gut issues such as constipation, reflux, celiac disease. Or we're going to be talking about sensory issues. So I'm going to hand over to one of our nutritionists and feeding therapists, Sarah, who's going to talk to us about nutrient deficiencies.
Thanks, Lisa. So for fussy eaters, nutrient deficiencies can become a vicious cycle. A limited diet leads to poor intake of key nutrients such as iron and zinc, which can cause deficiencies. These deficiencies may trigger symptoms such as reduced appetite, changes in mood or behavior, and that will then make children even less willing to try new foods. So first off the rank, we'll talk about zinc. So zinc deficiency is one of the most common nutrient gaps we see in clinic, particularly among fussy eaters and children with ADHD and ASD. Zinc plays a vital role in brain function, supporting communication, memory, learning, and mood regulation. And when levels are low, symptoms such as irritability, low mood, and poor attention often appear. So here we've got a list of some zinc deficiency signs. So things like white spots on the nails, sensory regulation issues, frequent infections or poor immunity, slow to heal skin, lack of appetite, digestive issues, slow wound healing, attention issues, acne, stretch marks, and poor nutrient absorption. When zinc levels are low, the body struggles to absorb and use other important nutrients, such as essential fatty acids that are really important for our brain health. So with zinc, we always say test, don't guess. While blood tests are considered the gold standard for diagnosing nutrient deficiencies, fortunately, a hair tissue mineral analysis that we offer in clinic can provide a clearer picture of long-term zinc status over several months. And when interpreting results, zinc level below 14 indicates a zinc deficiency. And here you can see a child who is very, very low in zinc. So while we encourage families to prioritize food-based sources of essential nutrients, we also use targeted supplementation in clinic to help achieve quicker results when needed. So a common question we get from parents is how to successfully get supplements into their child. And fortunately, with zinc, there are many child-friendly options available, which includes transdermal creams, high-quality gummies, chewables, powders, liquids, and capsules. As part of our Fuss No More program, we actually include a zinc transdermal cream and zinc gummies in the welcome pack to help families get started. Next nutrient that we'll discuss is iron. So iron is essential for a child's growth, energy, brain function, and immune health. And it's a vital part of hemoglobin, the protein in red blood cells that carries oxygen throughout the body, helping kids stay active and focused. When iron levels are low, it can affect both the body and the brain. Deficiency can lead to tiredness, poor concentration in learning, and changes in behavior such as irritability and a shorter attention span. These challenges can make mealtimes more stressful and worsen existing behavioral issues. Low iron can also disrupt neurotransmitters and the brain's chemical messengers, which can increase anxiety and changes in mood. Many fussy eaters miss out on iron-rich foods, and that creates that cycle that we spoke of before about it just reduces the appetite, which then in turn makes picky eating even harder to manage. So here we've got other signs of iron deficiency, such as pale skin, brittle or spoon-shaped nails, again, poor concentration, behavioral challenges, restless legs, white conjunctiva, which is the pale inner eyelids of the lower eyes when you drop your, to view your eyelid there, fatigue or low energy, heart palpitations, which is that feeling that the heart's beating unusually fast, hard, fluttering, or skipping beats, cold hands and feet, headaches, slow weight gain, and reduced appetite. When it comes to, one thing to note is when it comes to prescribing iron for children, we never assume a deficiency. It needs to be confirmed with a blood test. And while iron's an essential nutrient, it can be inflammatory to the gut. So we avoid supplementation unless there is a clear need. And only a blood test is the reliable way to confirm this. A hair tissue mineral analysis won't provide that accurate assessment. Essential fatty acids, these are vital for brain development, energy, and nutrient absorption in children. They play a key role in cognitive function and overall health, particularly during infancy and early childhood when the brain is rapidly developing. Fats act as a primary fuel source for the body and are essential for absorbing fat-soluble vitamins such as vitamins A, D, E, and K. And among these fats, omega-3 fatty acids, especially DHA, are crucial for building and maintaining brain cell membranes, supporting cognitive processes, and promoting brain flexibility and learning. When children have limited diets due to picky eating, their intake of these important nutrients can drop, potentially affecting their concentration, attention, and brain function. So ensuring adequate essential fatty acid intake will support a child's growth, learning, and emotional regulation. So here we've mentioned some deficiency signs: dry, scaly skin, hair loss or poor hair growth, poor wound healing, brittle nails, frequent infections, sensory issues such as sensory sensitivity to bright light, poor night vision, attention problems, emotional sensitivity, and sleep issues. So protein, the next kind of main nutrient, this is made up, protein's made up of amino acids, and they are the fundamental building blocks of the body. It's essential for a child's growth and development, helping to build and maintain muscles, organs, bones, and other tissues. Beyond growth, protein plays a crucial role in tissue repair, immune function, and production of hormones and neurotransmitters that regulate our mood, energy, and overall well-being. For children who are fussy eaters, meeting daily protein needs can be challenging. Over time, insufficient protein intake can lead to fatigue, poor concentration, delayed growth, weakened immunity, and bone or joint discomfort. Some of the other symptoms we've listed here, when we see kids who are always hungry or never satisfied, frequently grazing, wanting to snack on foods, we might be looking at there is a protein deficiency. And we've also got, I think I've mentioned all of the things on this list here. B vitamins. These are particularly important for fussy eaters as they support growth, brain development, and appetite regulation. Children who eat a highly processed diet are especially at risk of not getting enough of these essential nutrients from food alone. Deficiencies in B vitamins can contribute to irritability, restlessness, and difficulty with self-regulation. Vitamin B1 thiamine may help regulate appetite, and adequate thiamine levels are associated with a calmer disposition, reduced restlessness, and improved self-control, while deficiencies can increase irritability. Vitamins B6, B9, or folate, and B12 are essential for protein metabolism, red blood cell formation, and overall cell growth and function. And vitamin B12 is particularly critical for brain development in children. So B vitamin deficiency signs that we often see will be developmental delays, especially speech delays, irritability, anxiety, poor appetite, altered bowel habits, muscle weakness. This will affect chewing and posture, which is important for eating, fatigue, pale tongue, mouth sores, cracked lips, poor concentration, and pins and needles.
So before we move on to gut health, I'll just pause there and see, nobody has popped any questions into the chat, but if you do have a question, feel free to just unmute yourself and ask the question. So questions about nutrient deficiencies, zinc, iron. Usually people have a lot of questions about iron deficiencies because I guess it's the one that people are most aware of, that doctors will often test for. I find that doctors won't often test for zinc deficiency, so generally people actually don't realize that their child might be zinc deficient. Great, let me see what this question is. MTHFR gene, what B vitamins can we give? Great question, a very complex issue. So the first thing I would say is that we never test MTHFR gene in isolation because that tells you 2% of the information that you need. We do DNA testing. We look at 200 different genes together, and that will tell us exactly what B vitamins you need. Because a lot of people will say, oh, you've got MTHFR, you need to take methylated Bs. And that will help a lot of people with a homozygous MTHFR. However, if you have a SNP called MAO and you've got a fast MAO and you've got MTHFR and you take methylated vitamins, you will get very anxious and very depressed very quickly. So I would never decide just based on having MTHFR what sort of B vitamins to give. And the other thing is with MTHFR is that it's one of the many genes that influences methylation. COMT, MTRR, there's lots of different ones that affect methylation. With MTHFR, there's MTHFR 677 and 1298. And really, a lot of people will see that they're heterozygous for MTHFR 1298. And that's not really that important. Whereas if you're homozygous for MTHFR 677, that's very, very important. So again, just saying you've got MTHFR is not enough information. We really need to know the full picture of what's happening. But methylated vitamins will be exceptionally helpful in some people. That was kind of a roundabout way of saying we need more information. Does anybody have any other questions on nutrient deficiencies and fussy eating? Nope. All right, well then we will hand over to Summer to talk about gut health. There you go, Summer.
Thanks, Lisa. So I'm going to talk about gut health and how this is a part of the fussy eater picture. There's a lot of evidence that a child's gut health can play a big role in their eating habits. And when we ignore to treat gut problems in fussy eaters, they can make eating feel uncomfortable or even painful for a child. In response, the child starts avoiding certain foods or meals altogether. This leads to a more limited diet, and when poor in fiber, nutrients, or variety, gut health worsens, leading to more symptoms such as bloating, discomfort, and inflammation. As the gut becomes more unsettled, symptoms increase, and so does food refusal or extreme pickiness. And over time, this cycle can spiral and we find ourselves stuck in a vicious cycle. So let's move to the next slide and have a look at some common gut issues. We know that the gut and brain are in constant communication through what's called the gut-brain axis. This means that how a child feels in their tummy can directly affect their mood, behavior, and even their willingness to try new foods. If something feels off in their gut, kids may feel anxious, uncomfortable around food without even realizing why. Some common gut-related issues that can impact your child's appetite, food preferences, and willingness to eat include constipation. When a child's constipated, their bowels are sluggish and stools can build up in the gut. This causes bloating, discomfort, and sometimes even nausea. They might only want small, safe foods that they think won't upset their tummy. Then we've got gut inflammation due to food sensitivities. Foods such as dairy, gluten, soy can trigger low-grade inflammation in sensitive kids, even without a full allergy picture. This inflammation can irritate the gut lining, disrupt digestion, and lead to symptoms like cramping, bloating, fatigue, constipation, or loose stools. Then there's gut dysbiosis and inflammation. Dysbiosis means an imbalance between good and bad gut bacteria. This can lead to increased gut permeability, or what is generally known as leaky gut. which can then fuel gut and systemic inflammation. Some bad gut bacteria can produce certain byproducts like ammonia or histamine that actually can affect the way a child is feeling. Ammonia can affect brain function, mood, and focus. Histamine can cause headaches, rashes, anxiety, or digestive upset. When we've got inflammation in the gut, this is also going to impact the child's ability to digest the foods appropriately and absorb those nutrients that Sarah was talking about earlier. Reflux can also be a common gut issue in fussy eaters. So reflux is when stomach acid or food backs up in the esophagus, causing burning or discomfort. Especially in silent reflux, children may not complain of heartburn, but might show signs like frequent throat clearing, bad breath, refusal to eat. Eating then becomes unpleasant or even painful, and you may see them prefer to eat small quantities regularly or have a very low appetite. Then we've got eosinophilic esophagitis, or EOE. EOE is an allergic inflammatory condition where certain foods trigger the buildup of a type of white blood cell called eosinophils in the esophagus. This can cause pain when swallowing, food getting stuck, and a sense of choking. Diagnosis can be quite difficult, and it does require quite an invasive procedure of going in and taking a biopsy of the esophagus. But it can be a real big issue for some kids. Children may fear eating because it hurts or feels unsafe. Lastly, we've got celiac disease, which is another consideration. Celiac disease is that autoimmune response to gluten, which then damages the lining of the small intestine. This leads to poor nutrient absorption, gut inflammation, and symptoms like bloating, diarrhea, constipation, fatigue, irritability, and failure to thrive. Children will feel unwell after eating and begin avoiding food. So if your child is fussy with food, it's not always just behavioral. Their body may be sending important signals that something deeper is going on. Next, we've got a couple of different cases that we've seen in clinic. The first one, you can see a snapshot of a stool gut microbiome test that we like to carry out to understand the balance of your child's gut bacterial ecosystem. It will show us levels of gut inflammation and factors contributing to that inflammation. Here you can see that a pathogenic form of E. coli has been detected, and this is fueling inflammation. You can see some markers such as calprotectin and lactoferrin there. These are inflammatory markers. Both are considerably elevated. We're also seeing detection of occult blood in that stool sample. So highly inflammatory gut, being fueled not only by E. coli, but for this child, it definitely will be sending off for further testing to rule out some other conditions that might be fueling that really high calprotectin. Next, we have some blood test results. So here was a 3-year-old boy who presented to clinic with pica and aphid. Pica, for those who don't know, is when someone eats things that aren't food, like dirt, paper, soap, chalk. It can happen for several reasons, sometimes because of a nutrient deficiency like low iron or zinc, a developmental disorder like autism, or stress and mental health issues. ARFID is a diagnosis given to a child who has an extremely restricted diet and on a very limited number of foods. That's not due to body image or anorexia. Running bloods in this child and checking celiac markers revealed that he actually had celiac disease, which was contributing to his fussy eater. So these two examples show how the gut can play a big role in fussy eating.
Thanks, Summer. So I'll just share another little story about some clients that we have worked with. So this client has written, "We expect to receive help for feeding our 3-year-old, but receive so much more. Not only have we been given ability and methods to incorporate all foods such as cucumber, beetroot, tomatoes, blueberries, zucchini, and many more into his diet, we've also learnt the way to get him used to different foods and actually eat them. It was mind-blowing. So the child went from eating just nuggets and noodles to eating all of those above foods. The stool test, so similar to the one Summer just shared, showed huge amounts of bad bacteria and not enough good bacteria, which was then going to be affecting his level of comfort when eating. The hair analysis showed that he was very low in zinc. We've talked about how important zinc is for fussy eaters. It also showed low magnesium and selenium. And so obviously this client is just pleased to work with people who look at the entire picture together, not just one aspect, and that is that her child was only eating nuggets and noodles. So before we move on, does anybody have any questions? Just unmute yourself if you want to, you're more than welcome, or type them into the chat. So we're going to be moving on to sensory issues. So any gut issues, celiac questions, constipation questions? No, that's fine. We can also, we'll have a longer question time at the end. So I'm going to hand over to Celine, our dietitian, to talk through sensory issues.
Thanks, Lisa. So before we dive into the details of actually investigating sensory issues, thanks, Lisa. We can move on to the next slide. Thanks. So yeah, before we actually dive into the details of investigating sensory issues, we need to make sure that they are actually the problem. Sensory issues are often mixed with oromotor difficulties. And if we misdiagnose that, it can actually slow down or even stop the progress that we are making with feeding therapy. So how do we differentiate them? Oromotor issues, they involve the skills that the children are developing from a very early on to chew, to move food in the mouth, and to swallow. It includes the whole mouth and all the muscles that we've got outside and inside our mouth. So if your child has no problem with toothbrushing, that your child is mouthing his toys, but he actually doesn't really bite or holding the toys between their teeth. If he can tolerate other people's fingers in his mouth, if there's gagging happening, but it's with solids or with liquid, if the gagging is happening when the food is actually inside the mouth, through the when the food is moving through the oral cavity, if some vomiting happens with different textures, but not only one in particular. And if there's some difficulties, if you notice some difficulties with moving the food in the mouth, if there's lots of spilling, then it's very likely that we are facing some oromotor issues. If there's more problem with toothbrushing, if you see that your child is actually not mouthing their toys, if there's absolutely no tolerance of other fingers in the mouth, and the gagging is happening with solids only, and as well when the food is only just approaching the face, the lips or the tongue, if the vomiting happens with certain textures only, for instance, the puree, and if the food is held in a long time in the mouth to actually avoid swallowing, then it's likely that there's some sensory issues happening. Now, some children will have both. They will have oromotor and sensory challenges. And it makes it trickier to figure out what's happening. But our team is trained to identify these challenges, and we are actually working. We are actually more than happy to work as a disciplinary team, and work with your speechy and your OT, so that we actually making sure that we address the right issue to make progress. This is the Miller's sensory processing disorder classification. You can see that it has 3 types. The modulation one, which means that kids are over or under reacting to sensations. The motor one, which is involving sensory issues with movement and posture. And the last one is the discrimination, which means that the children have difficulties interpreting sensory informations in an accurate way. Why is this so important to us? Because a child with a restricted diet, due to sensory issues, can develop nutrient deficiencies. Nutrient deficiencies, and particularly the zinc, the iron, the magnesium, and the fatty acids, they can increase sensitivities. And it's just creating a vicious circle. We have here a very good example with zinc. So if a child has low zinc, their taste buds won't work very well. If their taste buds are not working very well, they will prefer bland food like meat, lentil, eggs, nuts. And then if they avoid that type of food, their zinc levels will drop even further. Let's talk about the key nutrients that are contributing to sensory difficulties. The zinc, we've mentioned it for taste and smell, and how the brain processes sensory information. The fatty acids, and particularly the omega-3, those ones, once we eat them, they will look for the help of the carnitine that we've got here, and they will produce energy. Without them, a child will feel tired and weak and nauseous, and their brain won't work well. And who wants to eat in those conditions? So eating will become even more difficult. There's lots of evidence that shows that omega-3 and vitamin E deficiencies in children with ASD can worsen sensory symptoms. The evidence around gluten and casein negatively impacting sensory issues is also emerging, and that's something we will always consider anyway. So how do we help with sensory issues and eating? You may have heard the recommendation to actually always use food first for nutrient deficiencies. But if we have a child with picky eating, it's not really realistic. So how do we help them? We use supplements: zinc, iron, magnesium, omega-3. This is the famous quadruplets. Those ones are very important. Now, we've mentioned it earlier with the zinc. We know that children will refuse some supplements, but we have strategies to help. We have, it goes from tasty gummy bears to tasteless powders. So we'll actually always try and find a way to get those supplements in the children. If we move on to the next slide. The gut-brain connection is also very important. So we also we are also supporting children's sensitivities by supporting the gut, because we know about the connection to the brain. And we do that using prebiotics and probiotics, so we can get a better balance. And I think it's important to know that prebiotics and probiotics are actually flavorless and that they can be easily sprinkled on food, added to any type of drinks without the children noticing. Balanced blood sugar. Balancing blood sugar is a very important point. If a child has a blood sugar dropping by 10 a.m., they won't feel relaxed or ready to enjoy a nice lunch. So for that, we'll help you include protein and healthy fats in the meal so that we don't have those blood sugar drops. Another point, too much sugar, artificial colors like lollies, sprinkles, ice cream, the preservative. When you look at the back of the packaging and you see those long list of E things, E100, E200 or 400, all of those are actually contributing to sensory challenges. How do we approach? What is our feeding therapy approach? We mainly focus on desensitization, and we do that through play, which means that we are working with children in a very low pressure way. We are involving some senses of eating, like looking at the food, touching, licking, tasting, and chewing when we can. And we do that through activities like stacking food, painting with yogurt, cutting cucumber slices into flowers, and a lot of other fun activities that are actually always based on your child's interests. When sensory issues are mixed with aromotor skills deficiencies, like we've seen before, we support the skill developments with exercises like blowing bubbles, sucking through a straw, so that we can strengthen the muscles that we need to make progress. Our sessions often start with regulation, because we know that it's promoting engagement. And we use activities like blowing bubbles, playing shops, doing some exercise, basically anything that will make your child happy and relaxed. And we will always start from where the child is comfortable. So we want them to feel safe. And for that, we will never force tasting. We'll always make sure that we are building trust in the first instance. Pressure phrases like just have one bite, it's actually not happening in our sessions. We prefer to describe the food in using a kind of curiosity building languages like, or this food is bumpy like the moon, or this little broccoli looks like a tree. Because we know that a child that is calm, who can have predictable sessions, will have lower anxiety and will increase his sensory tolerance.
Lovely. So do we have any questions about sensory issues? I know in sort of the conventional process, when your child has a sensory issue, you go to an OT and that's it. That's as far as, you know, the investigations or the treatment for sensory issues go. But as you can see, there's a lot that you can do looking at gut health, looking at nutrient deficiencies, looking at supplementation to significantly reduce sensory issues. And only today, somebody in my team sent me an email from one of our clients who the child just had massive, massive sensory issues about food, about clothes, about sand, everything. And after it was 3 weeks on the supplements, the majority of those behaviors had decreased significantly. So thank you for this question. How can carnitine deficiency and celiac be tested? Is it only via blood or hair mineral test? So for carnitine, we do a test called an organic acid test, and that is a urine test, so quite easy to do. And that will tell us if there's something going on with the fatty acid metabolism for that child. So it's not the first test that we jump to. We start with hair tissue mineral analysis, microbiome testing, and hopefully blood tests. But if we do see like extremely low muscle tone, a lot of fatigue, those sorts of issues, then we will do the organic acid test, look at fatty acids there. Celiac disease, there is a bit of a process that you can go through if you want to avoid a blood test. So you can first of all get tested for the celiac gene, and that's a swab, like one of those COVID swabs in your mouth. Very easy to do. That will tell you, does your child have the gene or do they not have the gene? If they don't have the gene, you can forget about celiac disease. You never need to worry about it again. If they do have the gene, 30% of the population also have the gene. So you're in this big bucket at a third of the population where you may or may not have celiac disease. So you still can't assume that they do. You need to then do a blood test. But if you're in the 70% that doesn't have the gene, you don't need to have the blood test. If you're in the 30%, next step is to do a blood test, which will show if you've developed antibodies to gliadin. And then with the example that we showed you with the 3-year-old boy, his levels were 200, well, greater than 250. So he was so far past the cutoff for celiac disease, he didn't need a colonoscopy. The gastroenterologist would just look at those and go, whoa, you've got celiac disease. If you've got lower levels, then the final step in the process is to have a colonoscopy and biopsy, which is not great to do with a child, but it is essential if you want to have a confirmed diagnosis and your blood results are not through the roof. So yes, it's a blood test ultimately for celiac disease. Neither of those things can be determined on a hair test. Any other questions about sensory issues? I love that we just have so much that we can add. So you would still, obviously, we would still recommend that you go to your OT and you have those sessions for desensitization. But if you do that in conjunction with the nutritional therapy, your results will be much better and much quicker. And ultimately, you won't need to see the OT for years and years. Okay, well, let's move on. Oops. So just another little review, which you can read through. And so this child, this is a great example because just move this not having a good tech day. This child was only eating Hungry Jack nuggets. So I love this about some of the fussy eaters that we see. It's not only will they only eat chicken nuggets as their meat, but they will only eat the specific brand of chicken nuggets. And in this child's case, it was the Hungry Jack chicken nuggets. And as Celine said, our approach is it's low pressure. We meet the child where they're at. So we don't look at this girl who's only eating Hungry Jack chicken nuggets and sit her down with a roast chicken, because that ain't going to work. If that was going to work, presumably the mother would have done that already. So her first bit of homework was to start to eat all the chicken nuggets. So getting the mother to actually do McDonald's chicken nuggets, do Coles chicken nuggets, do Woolies chicken nuggets, do gluten-free chicken nuggets, so that she's not so fixated on just one specific color, texture, flavor of chicken nuggets. And by doing that, you're reducing a child's sensory sensitivities because you're challenging them. This child, when they're only eating Hungry Jack chicken nuggets all the time, their sensory system has just gone to bed. It's in hibernation. It doesn't have to do a single thing. So getting that sensory system working by very, very gradually challenging it each time is super important. So as you can see, this child ended up eating even tinned salmon, which I would not be a big fan of myself, but that was great. So you can actually scan this QR code if you like, and that will take you to a page to download this Fussy Eaters and Nutrient Deficiencies little ebook that we have put together. So I'll just give you a second to find the little QR code scanner on your phone. And we'll move on to the next page. Another lovely review where the child's now eating steak, lamb, chicken, koftas, sausages, broccoli, cauliflower, all the different stuff. And this child was taking herbs. So not everybody in the team will be able to prescribe herbs, but herbs can be really, really useful, especially when there's things like anxiety happening for a child. And a lot of people think, well, obviously my child's a fussy eater, they're not going to take herbs. But children don't necessarily see herbs as a food, they see them as a medication. And a lot of children are very used to taking things like Panadol in a syringe. So surprisingly, we actually have great success with children taking herbs because they just have it in a syringe with a bit of juice, just like they would some Panadol. And this is the goal. The goal is for mealtimes to be fun and have a happier, healthier family. That's what we're after. So all these things that we've told you are a great start. So giving a zinc supplement is a great start. Addressing constipation is a great start. But what we try to do is we try to look at everything together, not just one nutrient or one supplement in isolation. So that's what we call our Fuss No More method. And we've been doing the Fuss No More method since the middle of 2020, which is more than 5 years ago. So we've had hundreds of children go through this program now with great success. So as I said, the goal is to have happy, relaxed family meal times. And what we do is we do an initial consultation because, as I say, no two fussy eaters are the same. So we sit down with a parent, even better if we can get two parents together to discuss your situation, your capacity to do different things, your child's health history, just everything. After that, we do the microbiome testing to see, is there an imbalance? Is there a pathogen? Is there a parasite? Is there something in your child's gut that's actually stopping them being able to eat well? Because I think it's also important to remember that a child doesn't necessarily want to live on chicken nuggets and rice crackers. They would like to be able to go to school and eat all the things that their friends are eating at school, but something is holding them back. And it's not stubbornness. It is never stubbornness. Then at the same time, we also do a hair tissue mineral analysis to look at things like zinc deficiencies, and then to look at heavy metals like lead and cadmium, which will affect your child's thinking, your child's focus, your child's ability to actually sit at the dinner table. Based on all of that information, we put together a treatment plan, which will include supplements always, but we are realistic, and some children will love gummies, some will only take powders, some will only take liquids. So we tailor what supplements we give your child based on what they are willing to accept. And then every week for 10 weeks, you sit down with one of the feeding therapists in the team, and we coach you, the parent, on how to play with food at home to assist your child, how to actually conduct meal times, how to back off and reduce the pressure at the dinner table. So most of the time we do this via telehealth. So we work with the parent who then works with the child. Some children, once they get to about the age of 12, we can work with them directly and do cooking with them or doing different. We're not, playing with food at that age. We're actually cooking things and getting them to explore food. If you live on the Gold Coast or if you live in the Illawarra, you can access our services in your home, and we will actually come to your home and work with your child in your very own kitchen. So definitely feel free to contact me at the end of today if you live in either of those locations. So the Illawarra is from Helensburgh to Kiama. And then we have, because we've been doing this for so long, we've got heaps of resources, recipes, videos, ebooks to help you on the journey. So another QR code for you. I got a little bit QR code obsessed with this one. But if you're interested in doing the 12-week program, scan this QR code and it will take you to the page where you can book a discovery call. So you can book a discovery call with Sarah and she'll explain a bit more about the program, how it works, what the practicalities are. A lot of the children we see have NDIS funding, either under dietitian or under therapy other. And if you would like to use your NDIS funding to do this program, please send an email to admin@thepaediatricnaturopath.com.au and I will send you a service agreement. We also have payment plans if you are paying privately. If you don't have NDIS funding, you can sometimes also access a Medicare plan. It's called an M10 or a chronic health management plan, and that will subsidize sessions with Celine. Only those plans cannot be used with the nutritionists on the team, only the dietitian. And that is the last page. So does anyone have any other questions? We do have until the hour is up, so we can have as many questions as we want in 9 minutes. So feel free to unmute if you like. I'm sure somebody has a question.
Hi, I have a question.
Yeah.
Can zeolites predispose ASD symptoms?
Can zeolites predispose ASD symptoms?
So my child who is 7, he never used to bite me or walk on his toes. But now, with the recommendation from his pediatrician, I have started giving him zeolites, and it's been 3 weeks, and I could see all that happening.
So the zeolites that most people use are micronized zeolites and like Touchstone and things like that. The way zeolites are meant to work is that the molecule will pick up things like heavy metals in the gut and carry it out of your gut. And that's zeolites such as Toxer Prevent, which is a type of cleanup tilolite. A micronized zeolite, like the drops, micronized means it's very, very small. So it can't physically pick up heavy metal and carry it out of its body. So that's why we never recommend micronized zeolites, because they can't really work. Some people do report getting good results, but we don't use them. The other thing is we never try to mobilize heavy metals without understanding what heavy metals are there, because we need to know if there's lead or cadmium or mercury, because the treatment is completely different depending on what the heavy metal is. We also make sure your child's elimination pathways are open. So they're doing at least 1 to 2 poos a day. They're weeing well, they're sweating regularly, that all their detoxification processes are working well. So what I would suspect is happening is the zeolite is stirring something up, but your child's not excreting it. Either because the zeolite, as I said, it's micronized, it's not able to pick up whatever it's stirring up and move it out of the gut, or perhaps just your child's detoxification process isn't working well. So I would 100% recommend that you do a hair tissue mineral analysis before going any further to make sure you know what you're actually dealing with. Toe walking is also very associated with a parasite. So it could be like unrelated to the zeolite, but your child could actually have a parasite as well.
Yeah, because I have stopped giving him that for now because he never used to do all that. And now all of a sudden, in 3 weeks' time, he was doing everything. And obviously, being a mom, I was Googling everything online, and all these symptoms were like, is he autistic?
And why had your pediatrician prescribed the zeolite or recommended the zeolite in the first place?
There is a language development delay because we are a bilingual family. And he sort of recommended to give him zeolite for the speech.
Okay. First of all, I would just say his speech delay is definitely not because you're bilingual.
Yeah.
Your speech delay is for a reason, but it is definitely not because you're a bilingual family. We have lots of tools in our toolbox for speech delay, and zeolite's not one of them, but we use lots and lots of other things to help children with speech.
Yeah, no, there's no speech delay at all because he's
Oops.
very fluent in our language, which we speak at home, but he's just not fluent enough in English. So
Oh,
that's the language. So that's sort of totally different.
mm.
But he was put on, you know, these zeolites, and obviously he started talking too much as well. And I had to sort of sometimes, you know, ask him to stop. But all the other symptoms like walking on, like tiptoeing and biting, he was sensitive to light at like a couple of situations as well. So that's why I was like, oh, you know, I need to, I think, stop giving him this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When children bite, I think it's usually because they're in some sort of pain.
Now he was doing like pretty much every day, I would say 3 or 4 times. He would come and just, you know, start biting. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on there. He never used to. He's 7. It's just
Yeah,
started happening since I started giving him the zeolites.
that's odd for it to start at 7.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
No problem. Another question, how many foods should we aim to introduce in a week? So this is the question with no answer, to be honest, because it really, really depends. Some children, it might take 6 months to get to the point of introducing new food. Some children, once we address their deficiencies and their sensory issues and maybe their constipation, they, introduce 10 foods in their first week. But we didn't talk about it today, but a great way to kind of move at your child's pace is to do family style serving. So that's where the food is in separate bowls in the middle of the table. There are some of your child's preferred foods there, but there's also all the other foods that the rest of the family is eating. And the rule is that everybody needs to take something from each of those serving bowls, and put it on their plate, but they don't have to eat it. So if you do that, you will basically find your level with your child, because he will put his chicken nuggets, he or she will put his chicken nuggets on the plate, but then he'll also have to put the corn on the cob and the peas and the sweet potato on his plate. And how many he introduces will be up to them, how many they do. So there's no rules around how many foods to introduce a week. It's just having the constant low pressure exposure whilst working on the underlying issues. But it's a good question. Any other questions? We have 3 more minutes if anybody else would like to ask anything. Do you often see kids with celiac disease? Is it common? And what are the symptoms that you might see in a child? So I firmly believe that every child should be checked for celiac disease when they go for, or if they go for their routine vaccinations, because it's just another needle. Why is a needle in so different to a needle out? I don't know. I don't know why it's not more commonplace, but every child should be checked for celiac disease, in my opinion, because only 50% of children with celiac disease will have gut symptoms. The other will have any other symptom. Like their hair could be falling out, their teeth enamel could be bad, their sleep might be bad, they might have anxiety. And it takes a pretty switched on GP to look at this random collection of symptoms and say, oh, well, maybe they've got celiac disease. But we do pick it up in kids reasonably frequently. Not every week, but I would say I pick it up in a child every 3 months on average. And it's life changing, because undiagnosed celiac disease will just wreak havoc with your child's health. And the first question I asked is there any celiac disease in your family? And a lot of people, well, most people will say no. Then I'll say, is there any bowel cancer in your family? And people, oh, yeah, like my uncle, my granddad, my grandmother, they all died of bowel cancer. And what happens is if somebody has celiac disease and it's never diagnosed, the worst case scenario is that they get bowel cancer. Irish people are at a higher risk of celiac disease than other nationalities. And if I think of, an Irish person, an Irish man in the 1970s, 1980s, do you think they would go to the doctor because they've got some blood in their poo or because they've got some discomfort when they eat? They just don't do it. So they would just, older people in some countries would just live with the symptoms their whole life and then bowel cancer and die of that. But those people probably had celiac disease. So I try to get every single child I see to do a blood test, and I check them for celiac disease as much as I can because it's so important and it's so unpredictable as well.
Can I just ask a really quick question?
Of course.
My daughter has suspected celiac because I'm celiac and also other intolerances. We struggle with gut health, I'm sure, after fussy eating plus constipation. Do you also see like urinary type issues involved with, you know, I suppose the gut health side of things? Because she tends to have urinary issues, like holding off going, and I think she's a bit nervous about going to the bathroom. We've had a couple of UTIs since she's been, or 2 and she's now 5.
Yeah. So most UTIs will be due to E. coli.
Mm.
And E. coli lives in your gut. And the stool test that Summer showed earlier showed really, really high levels of a pathogenic E. coli. That was in a boy. But if that was in a girl, you would definitely expect them to have some urinary tract infections as well, because boys have the benefit of having a longer urinary tract. Girls, it's right beside their bum. So the poo comes out, the wee comes out. It's very, very easy for those pathogenic E. coli's to translocate from the gut into the urethra. So yes, and being constipated will also lead to urinary issues because they're not voiding enough, because or they're they're not voiding fully, and then they have that sort of residual sort of level of urine in their bladder. So yeah, big connection.
Thank you.
Okay, well, it is 1 o'clock. So thank you so much for giving up your lunchtime on a Friday to join us for this. I will be sending out this recording as well. So if you want to watch it again, you definitely can, or if you want to share it with a friend. Thank you guys. You're all very, very welcome. It's our pleasure. And feel free to get in touch. The best email address is admin@thepediatricnaturopath.com.au. And I hope to talk to some of you soon. Thank you very much.